Alright, hello and welcome to Camel Finance. I'm your boy Camel, and today I want to talk to you about the impact of rising energy prices on Bitcoin mining and on the Bitcoin price. So let's get straight into this. The energy prices are going through the roof all around Europe and frankly all over the world. This is probably not news to anyone by now. We've seen, just as a few quick examples, the energy prices could push the UK inflation to 22%, which is a post-war record. This is very recent news. You can see 30th of August. 22% is, of course, half the real number because they lie about the CPI by omitting certain things from the basket when they do the calculation, like food and energy. So all of this is starting to be noticed by everyone. Everyone is noticing that inflation is becoming an issue. And off the back of inflation becoming an issue, the energy prices are going through the roof. In the UK, we've also had an 80% rise in energy bills. I've covered this on the channel. If you live in the UK, you'll already probably be aware of this. And the cap is now at £3,500 a year, which is up from around 1,100 or 1,200, right? The cap on energy prices does not apply to businesses. So again, if you live in the UK, particularly if you're a business owner, you'll know about this. We're seeing headlines like businesses are struggling to survive as there's no cap on their energy bill and they're getting completely stung with enormous energy bills. They just can't afford to keep their small and medium businesses open. We're seeing pubs closing because their bill has gone to 35,000 a year from 13,000. So this is a massive increase. So here's another article. The UK pubs warn of mass closures without state support. And the reason I've got this here is, notice this, without state support. So we'll get back to that in just a second. Here is a worked example where you can see that somebody's day rate and night rate has gone from 15.5 and 11p to 81 and 71, which is enormous. And so this person says, look, my mum owns a small cafe. Her electricity bill has jumped from 10k a year to 55k. She is working out her options, but most likely is going to be forced to close. So over in Germany, it's kind of a similar story, isn't it? The German power price has gone parabolic. I've shown this chart before on the channel. The French are dealing with the same sort of issue. And this is the average for Italy. This is a 10x, okay? This is absolutely massive. How are businesses supposed to cope with this? I've got here another worked example from somebody in the south of Italy. In 2021, they had 120k electricity bill, and in 2022, just under €1,000,000. So you can see that they actually said something, what was their words? A holiday in July would have been more profitable than keeping the business open with these input costs. So as you can see, like, this is absolutely out of control. Businesses are not going to be able to sustain this. So before I move on to how this impacts Bitcoin, in the interest of full disclosure, I don't know if this is going to turn out to be a temporary blip or if we're just getting some kind of pullback before this thing continues to extend higher. But this is France. As you can see, the parabola has pulled back significantly, 36% down in a single day. So was this just some kind of blow-off move and now it's going to revert to the mean, or is this just a pullback before moving higher? That remains to be seen. But even if it stays at this level, this is still a ridiculously high increase, and this is still not really sustainable for most small and medium businesses. This is also true of Germany. So you can see here, I showed you up to the first peak before, and in just a few days, the prices have reverted seemingly back to mean. So they are still elevated, but nothing like what they were. So was this just some kind of push to fearmonger? Was this just some kind of push to force out some small and medium businesses on their renewal? Is there going to be support? Is this whole thing about getting people to ask the government for support? That remains to be seen. But one thing we do know is, even if this was the top and all energy prices are going to come back down immediately, then the damage has still been irreversible for many of these companies, right? And so we've had lockdowns which have forced out small and medium businesses to close. This has led to them going bankrupt, especially the ones with high debt or low margins. So is this the same but different? That's what it seems like, right? We've got high energy costs forcing small and medium businesses to close down. But ultimately, this is a transfer of wealth from small to medium businesses over to the large corporations. The inflation, cost of living, cost of running a business causes poverty, and it forces people to accept CBDCs, which, by the way, the Fed CBDC is going to go live in 8 to 10 months as per yesterday's news. So they just come out and announced this Fed Now program. So here it is, CBDC alternative Fed Now to launch next summer. So you can see this is coming as early as May or as late as July. And here is the link up here if you want to go and check it out on the actual Fed website. So you can go and read that in your own time. I'm not going to bore you with that right now. So how does all of this affect Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining? Well, we're used to seeing in the news, especially in the mainstream media, that Bitcoin's energy consumption equals that of Switzerland, or ridiculous headlines like Bitcoin consumes more electricity than Sweden and Ukraine. But all of this argument is kind of malicious, and it's all based on nonsense, and I'll show you exactly why. So first of all, we have to acknowledge a double standard here. Why is it that Bitcoin gets attacked for its energy usage when things like clothes dryers, tumble dryers, what we call them in the UK, when these things are using way more electricity, right? And nobody cares. Nobody cares because people don't want to dry their clothes by hand or hang them outside. Or people don't have a problem with clothes dryers, even though these things are highly, highly inefficient. But you don't hear anyone saying, oh, we need to get rid of our tumble dryers because they're bad for the environment. You never hear that argument, do you? Also, how much of the internet is this stuff? 35% of the entire internet is this toxic stuff right here, right? How much electricity do the servers that host this? Keeping in mind, this is over a third of the entire internet is hosted, of course, on servers, right, that run on electricity, that are plugged in and whirring away 24/7. So what's the motive here? So we got here the Bitcoin Mining Council. Again, I'd encourage you to go and look through this in your own time. What I've done is I've pulled the Q2 Bitcoin Mining Council survey, and this was hurting my eyes white on black for some reason. I don't know why. So here's the link. You know, don't take my word for it. Go and verify this for yourself. But all I did was I copy and pasted it in here, and then I took what I believe the highlights to be. So I'll just skim through the highlights so this doesn't end up as a 40-minute video. But of course, I encourage you to don't take my word for it. Go and check this. Go and read all this for yourself. Understand that I haven't paraphrased this or cherry-picked the data. I've just chosen the highlights to keep the video short. The Bitcoin mining electricity mix increased to 59.5% sustainable in Q2 of 2022. So what does this mean? It means 2/3 of the entire Bitcoin network's energy is sustainable. And if you think about how mining works, the cheaper and the more sustainable their energy is that they use to mine Bitcoin, the lower their overheads. If they can get free electricity from solar panels or from wind farms or from whatever, then they don't have to pay the electricity company by selling their Bitcoin into the open market. When they mine their Bitcoin, it's just more profit for them. It doesn't make sense to have a high electricity cost. It doesn't make sense to be burning fossil fuels to run a mining rig, because then you have lower margins. Bitcoin incentivizes having cheaper electricity. Based on this data, it's estimated the global Bitcoin mining industry's sustainable electricity mix is now 59.5%, and it's increased approximately 6% year on year from back in 2021. This makes it one of the most sustainable industries globally. Let me say that again. This makes it one of the most sustainable industries globally because nothing else incentivizes getting free electricity. With Bitcoin, you have 2 or 3 overheads. You have cooling, you have the mining rigs, the computers themselves, spare parts for those, of course, and then you have electricity. If you have free electricity, then all you have to do is worry about keeping everything cold and keeping the computers working. You know, you remove a whole third of the problem there. Additionally, year on year, it's estimated that the global Bitcoin network's technological efficiency grew by 46%. This efficiency gain reaffirms the fact that as the Bitcoin network continues to grow, it will become even more efficient over time. And in the second quarter of 2022, the hash rate and related security of the Bitcoin network improved by 137% year on year, whilst the energy usage only increased 63%. They observed a 46% year-on-year increase in efficiency due to advances in semiconductor technology, the rapid expansion of North American mining, the China exodus, where of course China got rid of a lot of their miners, and the worldwide adoption of sustainable energy and modern Bitcoin mining techniques. So I encourage you to go and read all of this in detail. I've just pulled out the highlights for you. But as you can see, the highlights here tell us a completely different story to the mainstream media. The mainstream media is telling us that this thing consumes too much electricity and is really bad for the environment and it's gross. But when you dive into it, this is the most sustainable industry in the entire world and is running on 2/3 renewable energy. And even when it more than doubles in size in a year, you only see less than half of an increase in the energy usage. Keep in mind all of these places that they get mining electricity from that would otherwise just be wasted energy. You don't see any other industry doing things like this. They use hydroelectric to power their miners. Okay, this is like waterfalls and dams. Wherever they can find flowing water, particularly heavy and fast flowing water, they will rig up turbines to this and convert that electricity into mining Bitcoin. Solar, self-explanatory, and wind. They use nuclear energy as well, which you might think is really dangerous and bad, but it's actually not that. It's not that complicated, and it's not that bad, right? Do you know they harness the energy from volcanoes and geothermal? So this is the heat from inside volcanoes and inside the core of the planet that would otherwise just be going to waste. They harness this to mine Bitcoin. Okay? There's no other industry that does this, no other industry that motivates people to find free and clean and renewable sources of energy. There's no other industry. Carbon generation, okay, methane and gas flare-offs. This is where you have natural gas plants, and they can only take so much of their gas that they harvest and store it and convert it to electricity. And what this means is they build up giant excesses, and then what do they do with that excess? They flare it off into the atmosphere. They literally set it on fire. Around 5% of what they mine every month gets set on fire and released into the atmosphere. But now, thanks to Bitcoin mining, you can connect your rigs and your ASICs and your miners to this gas, and you don't have to flare it off into the environment. They also use Bitcoin for power grid stabilization. So this prevents the surges and the blackouts in the grid. They can stabilize it. When people are using a lot of power during peak times, what you see is miners roll back off. And then conversely, when everyone's at bed at night and no one's using any electricity or relatively less electricity, they power the miners back on in order to maintain a stable flow and prevent surges and blackouts and power cuts, right? Again, they don't tell you this in the mainstream media, do they? And finally, landfill burning converted to methane and then turned into electricity to mine Bitcoin. No one else, no other industry is digging up landfill and finding a way to convert it into methane so they can get cheap electricity. No one else is doing that because why would they? There's no motivation to do that, unless of course you mine Bitcoin. So with all this said, why is there an attack on Bitcoin for its energy when it's demonstrably false, when it's demonstrably renewable, it's demonstrably not as bad as many other toxic industries? How much energy does the banking industry use, keeping all of those skyscrapers worldwide lit up and heated all year round, right? With hundreds of computers inside, thousands possibly. No one ever mentions that. So why? Why this attack on Bitcoin for its energy? Well, because ultimately, what they want to do is transition Bitcoin from proof of work, which is what it is now, to proof of stake. And you can see this when you've got Ripple co-founders donating 5 million to the initiative. So why do they want to do this? Well, because they can never control proof of work Bitcoin. All the while, there's a decentralized network of miners keeping Bitcoin safe and protected and secure. They can never control it. They can never stop it. Even if they ban it, even if they make it illegal, they can never stop this, right? But what we'll see with a move to proof of stake is that they can start to make protocol updates. Given that they've got the most money, hedge funds like BlackRock are moving in, they could buy up all this Bitcoin, stake it, and start to fork the chain. They could start to make protocol updates. They could completely ruin and destroy Bitcoin by switching it to proof of stake. But there's no way that the Bitcoin miners are ever going to give up their proof of work. There's no way that Bitcoiners are ever going to allow this. So what they're trying to do is sow the seed of doubt and make it seem like this is a really bad and toxic industry and this is a terrible thing for the planet, to make people try to support this switch to proof of stake that they want. But let me tell you right now, they're never going to get it. They're never going to get it. People that own Bitcoin, people that mine Bitcoin, node operators are never going to allow this proof of stake switch. But this is why they continue to push this narrative, because they're trying to make it out like it's bad for the environment. Proof of stake has always been touted as energy efficient, as significantly better for the environment than Bitcoin. But quite frankly, this is a feeble attempt to try to dominate and control something that can never be dominated, neither controlled. Of course, another thing that they can do by switching it to proof of stake is they can start to censor transactions. We're seeing this with Ethereum. The validators that hold the large stakes of Ethereum can lead them to censoring transactions. And wouldn't they love to be able to censor Bitcoin transactions? Wouldn't they love to be able to stop you buying whatever it is you want to buy with your own peer-to-peer distributed currency? Not to mention, they're going to be running some of their CBDCs on this public Ethereum chain. Okay? So you can see why they want proof of stake and CBDCs, because they want control. They don't want you to have a censorship-resistant peer-to-peer currency. So are they going to continue to push this narrative? Yes. Are they going to continue a futile attempt to convert the Bitcoin chain to proof of stake? Yes, most likely. But does any of this matter? No. And so that brings me on to the final question here. What is the impact of all of this price rises? Let's assume they continue to go up or stay high. Does this impact Bitcoin mining? Well, the answer in short is no. 2/3 of the network will be completely unaffected because it's already operating on renewable/free/independently sourced energy. Most of these energy systems were only set up to mine Bitcoin because there's no other incentive exists, as I've already covered. The remainder of the network would likely be impacted. They'll have higher energy costs. In the short term, this could force miners to shut down. It could force miners to move to cheaper, renewable or free energy, like the other 2/3 of the network. Those would ultimately be their two choices. Or, of course, if the price goes up, then it's not really an issue. They would just have smaller profit margins, and over time, we know that the number goes up. So what about a death spiral? Is this on the cards? Well, no. The answer is no, because of the difficulty adjustment that occurs every 2016 blocks, which happens approximately every 2 weeks. So if you don't know what this is, a quick summary of the difficulty adjustment. Let's say that the energy prices stay high and it forces a bunch of miners off of the network. They have to close down their operation because they can't afford the energy. Well, what this means is there is less computers competing to mine and hash every block. So what this means is the blocks would come out slower than every 10 minutes. But Bitcoin, being a self-healing and self-repairing network, would only tolerate this for 2016 blocks, or approximately 2 weeks, before it completes a self-assessment and realizes the blocks are taking longer than every 10 minutes to be mined, at which point it will change the difficulty adjustment to make it easier to mine Bitcoin. And the reason it does this is because it knows there are less miners connected to the network, so it knows it needs to make it easier in order to maintain that 10-minute block heartbeat. The converse is true as well. So if more and more miners join the network, then what we would see is an increase in hash rate, and therefore you'd expect the blocks to start being mined quicker. This would of course bleed the Bitcoin out of the system. And so every 2016 blocks, or approximately every 2 weeks, Bitcoin completes this self-assessment and works out, oh, all the Bitcoin are coming out far too fast. We better make it more difficult to find the block hashes. So then it will increase the difficulty and thus restore the balance and restore the 10-minute block heartbeat. So ultimately, high energy prices can only affect inefficient miners over the short term. As time goes on, all we will see is continued incentive for miners to find more and more efficient ways to mine Bitcoin via renewable, free and independently sourced energy. Any short-term pain on the network can only result in a temporary drop in hash rate before the difficulty adjustment is carried out and the balance is restored to the Bitcoin network. I wish I could say the same is true for small and medium businesses, but these are not self-healing like Bitcoin is. Businesses like this are not going to be able to survive or perform a difficulty adjustment on their business where suddenly they can make it so that they can re-heal and rebalance from these enormous price spikes. As I said earlier, I fear that just in the way lockdowns destroyed an awful lot of small and medium businesses, this is going to be the same, just slightly different. High energy costs this time forcing small and medium businesses to close. One thing I am confident of is we're going to continue to see this Bitcoin narrative being shilled in the mainstream media. They're going to continue to push this false narrative that it's bad for the environment. They're going to do so because they want to move it to proof of stake so they can try and dominate and control the network. But I can tell you also that any attempt to do so is futile, absolutely futile, and will not work. My heart truly goes out to all those suffering from the energy crisis, from the increase in energy bills, and I hope that all of these small and medium businesses can find a way to resist these increase in energy prices and find a way to keep hold of their businesses and prevent all of this wealth being transferred over to the large corporations. In the meantime, if you found value here today, I'd appreciate it if you drop a like on the video, subscribe if you're not already, let me know if there's anything you want to cover, and until next time, I'm your boy Camel. Take care. Cheers. Bye.